Welcome to Audit the Audit, where we sort out the who and what and the right and wrong of police interactions. This episode covers mental health, obstruction, and searches, and is brought to us by Nate Argent's channel. Be sure to check out the description below and give them the credit that they deserve. On October 31st, 2023, around 3 a.m., Walmart employee Nathan Argent was taking his lunch break in the store parking lot in Stuttgart, Arkansas, when he was approached by Officer Haley Johnson and Sergeant Williams of the Stuttgart Police Department. The officers were responding to a call from Mr. Argent's ex-wife, Patricia Amity, who claimed that Mr. Argent had been making threats against himself via text. Mr. Argent asserts that this claim was false. The interaction that followed was captured on Officer Johnson's body camera.
Hey, Bob. Are you Nathan? Is your name Nathan?
Could be. What's this about?
Hey, so your wife wanted us to check on you.
My wife?
Yeah. Are you going through something?
Yeah, but...
Can you put your hands out of your pocket for me? No, you're good.
Am I being detained?
No. Hey, I need you to come back over here and talk to me, though. That's a order. Hey.
Yes or no?
Sir, I'm just trying to... Listen, we're just doing a welfare check on you.
Yes. Am I being detained? Yes or no?
Not right now. I need to talk to you.
Better get back to work.
He don't want to talk.
Hey, come here. Come here. Well, it's not wasting your time. Right now you're detained. We're here lawfully. We got a call about it. So what's going on?
Detained for what?
Well, if you're that is a crime.
It's a crime to be...
It is.
Well, I'm not...
Sergeant Williams tells Mr. Argent that he is being detained based on Ms. Amity's allegations regarding his intentions, claiming that it was a crime. At common law, the act of ending one's life was a felony offense, and an attempt to do so was considered a misdemeanor. However, these actions have since been decriminalized in the United States, although they still remain a crime in some other countries. Notably, ideation alone was never outlawed, as all crimes require an individual to take some sort of action or engage in conduct, and a mere mental state cannot be criminalized. While the allegations involving Mr. Argent clearly were not of a criminal nature, contrary to Sergeant Williams' assertion, there are circumstances where officers can detain or even take into custody individuals who are experiencing a mental health crisis. According to Section 20-47-207 of the Arkansas Code, individuals can be involuntarily admitted to a hospital, receiving facility, or treatment program, now quoting from the section, if he or she is in such a mental condition as a result of mental illness, disease, or disorder that he or she poses a clear and present danger to himself or herself or others. The statute clarifies that whether an individual is a clear and present danger to themselves is established by demonstrating certain particular conduct, such as that they have inflicted serious bodily injury on themselves, or have attempted to end their lives or inflict serious self-injury, and there is a reasonable probability that the conduct will be repeated if admission is not ordered. The statute also states that, quote, a clear and present danger to others is established by demonstrating that the person has inflicted, attempted to inflict, or threatened to inflict serious bodily harm on another, and there is a reasonable probability that the conduct will occur if admission is not ordered. Additionally, under Section 20-47-210 of the Arkansas Code, quote, whenever it appears that a person is of danger to himself or herself or others, and immediate confinement appears necessary to avoid harm to the person or others, an interested citizen may take the person to a hospital or to a receiving facility or program. If no other safe means of transporting the individual is available, it shall be the responsibility of the law enforcement agency that exercises jurisdiction at the site where the individual is physically located and requiring transportation. The statute also authorizes a judge to order a law enforcement agency to transport an individual to a receiving facility if the judge determines that, quote, immediate confinement is necessary to prevent death or serious bodily harm to either the person sought to be involuntarily admitted or to others. Given the requirement that an individual pose an immediate threat to themselves or others for involuntary commitment to be appropriate, it is almost certain that even if Mr. Argent was expressing ideation to his ex-wife, he would not be a candidate for admission for treatment under these statutes. As such, it is probable that a court would conclude that the officers did not have the authority to detain Mr. Argent, as they did not have any reason to believe he was a clear and present danger to himself or others, or that he had committed a crime. Now, while the officers certainly could have engaged in a consensual encounter to attempt to help him, if needed, needed, Mr. Argent would have a strong argument that they could not force him to engage in conversation against his will.
Well, that's not what we got.
Well, that's
Do you
not
have
my
your ID
problem.
on you?
Nope.
You're going to go to jail. Walk away.
Then take me to jail.
If you walk away from me, you're going to jail.
Really? For
Yes.
what?
Obstruction.
For what?
So keep arguing.
So, I'm being detained for what?
We got a call. We're here to talk to you. I don't care if you want to talk to us or not.
Okay. So you're just going to keep me out in the cold?
I will. So what is going on?
I'm not talking to you without any further questions.
That's fine. Go ahead and turn around and show my back.
Sergeant Williams threatens to take Mr. Argent to jail for obstruction if he walks away from him. Then, when Mr. Argent refuses to answer any questions without a lawyer present, Sergeant Williams places him in handcuffs. Under Section 5-54-102 of the Arkansas Code, quote, "A person commits the offense of obstructing governmental operations if the person knowingly obstructs, impairs, or hinders the performance of any governmental function. Accordingly, if an individual walks away from a lawful detention, they could potentially be convicted of violating the obstruction statute. However, even assuming for the sake of argument that Sergeant Williams lawfully detained Mr. Argent, he only attempted to walk away after Officer Johnson told him he was not being detained. And when Sergeant Williams informed him that he was being detained, he made no additional attempts to leave. The Supreme Court has acknowledged that individuals are within their rights to walk away from consensual encounters with police officers and to refuse to answer questions during both consensual and non-consensual interactions. For instance, in the 1983 case of Florida versus Royer, the Supreme Court explained in the context of consensual encounters that, quote, "The person approached need not answer any question put to him. He may decline to listen to the questions at all and may go on his way." Likewise, in the 1984 case of Berkemer versus McCarty, the Supreme Court recognized the right to refuse to answer questions during a Terry stop, stating that, quote, "Under the Fourth Amendment, we have held a policeman whose observations lead him reasonably to suspect that a particular person has committed, is committing, or is about to commit a crime may detain that person briefly in order to investigate the circumstances that provoke suspicion. Typically, this means that the officer may ask the detainee a moderate number of questions, but the detainee is not obliged to respond. Accordingly, it is highly likely that a court would conclude that the officers did not have probable cause to believe that Mr. Argent committed obstruction by attempting to walk away from what Officer Johnson characterized as a consensual encounter, or by refusing to answer questions after Sergeant Williams informed him that he was being detained. It should also be noted that in her police report about the encounter, Officer Johnson implied that Mr. Argent was arrested for a refusal to identify, which can support an obstruction charge in some circumstances under Arkansas law. In her report, Officer Johnson wrote, quote, "The man, later identified as Nathan Argent, was being very confrontational during the entire encounter. Argent walked away from officers on scene multiple times while trying to investigate the situation. Sergeant Williams asked Argent to provide his identification, in which his response was in the nature of, 'Well, I'm not going to talk to you then.' Argent was then arrested for obstruction of governmental operations." Now, although Mr. Argent did state that he did not have his identification on him, he never refused to identify himself. And even if he had, in the 2008 case of Stufflebeam versus Harris, the 8th Circuit Court of Appeals, which has jurisdiction over Arkansas, concluded that Arkansas law did not permit a police officer to arrest an individual for refusing to identify themselves when they are not suspected of other criminal activity, and their identification is not needed to protect officer safety or to resolve whatever reasonable suspicions prompted the officer to initiate an ongoing traffic stop, or Terry stop. The obstruction statute also states that, quote, "This section does not apply to obstruction, impairment, or hindrance of what a person reasonably believes is a public servant's unlawful action." Accordingly, it is likely that a court would conclude that Mr. Argent could not be convicted of obstruction if he had refused to identify himself because the officers did not have reasonable suspicion to detain him.
Oh, well, you can detain me without handcuffs. I think you're just intimidating me. All right. Yeah.
Do you have anything that's going to poke, stick, or stab you? You don't know?
Probably.
If there is anything in there, can you please let us know? Hey, Nathan.
That's fine, because if anything does tap me, that's a charge.
Really?
Really?
You're on the list. I'm sorry, why are you searching me? Because this is more than a Terry stop.
Yes, it is.
Or, I'm obviously not obstructing you.
You obviously were.
Okay.
Because when you walk away from us, when we're here legally and you were detained, that is obstruction.
You walk away from here.
You were 100% walking away from me.
At first, that was before you told me I was detained. And it will show on your body cam. Yeah, you're just violating my right.
Well, there's no violation of rights when you're under arrest.
It's a false arrest.
Sergeant Williams goes through Mr. Argent's pockets and places the contents on the hood of the police cruiser. And when Mr. Argent protests, Sergeant Williams claims that the search does not violate any of Mr. Argent's rights because he is under arrest, despite his earlier contention that Mr. Argent was only being detained. The Supreme Court established in the infamous Terry case that during a detention based only on reasonable suspicion, an officer may conduct a pat-down search to determine whether the detainee is carrying a weapon if the officer has reason to believe that they are armed and presently dangerous. However, as the Supreme Court explained in the 1993 case of Minnesota versus Dickerson, this sort of protective search, sometimes referred to as a Terry frisk, now quoting, must be strictly limited to that which is necessary for the discovery of weapons, which might be used to harm the officer or others nearby. If the protective search goes beyond what is necessary to determine if the suspect is armed, it is no longer valid under Terry, and its fruits will be suppressed. On the other hand, it has long been established that officers may conduct an extensive search of an individual's person once they have been placed under arrest. And in the 1973 case of U.S. versus Robinson, the Supreme Court confirmed that, quote, in the case of a lawful custodial arrest, a full search of the person is not only an exception to the warrant requirement of the Fourth Amendment, but is also a reasonable search under that amendment. However, it is crucial to keep in mind that in order for a search incident to arrest to be constitutional, it must be conducted as part of a lawful arrest based on probable cause. Accordingly, if an underlying arrest is not supported by probable cause, any evidence the officers obtained as a result of the search incident to arrest could be suppressed, meaning that it could not be used in a criminal case against the individual who was searched. Here, the officers' search clearly exceeded the scope of a Terry frisk, as they removed objects that were clearly not firearms or weapons from his pockets and examined them. And although the extent of the search would have been appropriate during a lawful arrest, as we discussed earlier in this episode, it is likely that a court would conclude that the officers did not have the probable cause necessary to constitutionally arrest Mr. Argent, so it is probable that any evidence the officers obtained during this search could be suppressed in any attempted criminal prosecution.
Do you know who is over the construction for tonight?
I can call somebody.
Okay. So we came over here to do a welfare check on a Nathan Argent. I don't have his driver's license. Hold on. He drives a Prius with a rack.
Camera go. Okay.
Okay, he's been arrested.
Oh.
Okay, so we came over here to do a welfare check. His wife said that he's been threatening to kill himself, that she's been trying to beg him to come home.
Whoa, I knew there was something wrong with it. The last couple of days of the project, he was off.
So, he was walking away from his car whenever he pulled up. And I asked the other officer, do you know, is that him? She was like, I never even saw that person. So I did my little whoop whoop at him, ignored it, did it 2 more times. He looked back and kept on walking, refused to talk to me. You know, hey, I need to know if you're okay. I ain't got to talk to you. Walks off. So he's going to jail.
Okay.
I don't know what you want to do with this car out there.
I mean, dude's like 2 hours away from home.
Yeah, Atkins or Elkins, something like that.
When will he be released?
I personally don't know if the jail will be holding misdemeanors, so it's possible that he'll go down there to DeWitt and just get OR'd. But he'll be on the streets in DeWitt. But
how far is that away? Like an hour?
30 minutes.
It's 25 miles. It's not too terrible. But I do suggest that, I mean, I'm going to call his wife when we're done here, because he was very agitated with us when had an attitude when I asked to get his hands out of his pockets, because, you know, we were told that he likes to carry knives and sharp objects. Went to pat him down. Is there anything in here that's going to stick or poke me? You'll find out.
Oh, wow.
So,
yeah, that's not something you want to hear.
Yeah.
I mean, honestly, I hate to see dude's stuff go to get impounded and stuff. I hate to see him get stuck.
Well, we're not going to tow it because we never actually physically saw him inside the car.
Okay.
So we didn't search his car. We don't know what's in it. We know he had a box cutter. That's probably from working up in here.
Yeah.
But I think we're just going to get him with obstruction just because he wouldn't, like, sit there and talk to us. Didn't want to give us his ID.
Oh, yeah,
you know, we already knew who he was, but...
white stuff.
While the officers were searching Mr. Argent, they found a bottle of non-narcotic blood pressure pills that belonged to his father-in-law in one of his pockets. After she spoke with Mr. Argent's employer, Officer Johnson reported that she contacted Ms. Amity, who claimed that Mr. Argent must have taken the pill bottle from her home. Mr. Argent was transported to the Arkansas County Detention Center, and according to Officer Johnson's police report, he was charged with obstruction of government operations and, quote-unquote, theft by receiving. The charges against Mr. Argent were eventually dropped, but Mr. Argent was fired from his job at Walmart. As of the date of writing this episode, Mr. Argent is still looking for a civil rights attorney to help him file a lawsuit, and has started a GoFundMe campaign to assist with legal fees and his past due storage unit rent, which he fell behind on after losing his job. I've included a link to his campaign in the description down below. Overall, the Stuttgart officers get an F for arresting Mr. Argent for simply attempting to exercise his rights, disparaging Mr. Argent and misrepresenting his conduct to his employer after the unlawful arrest, and demonstrating an appalling lack of compassion and common sense throughout the interaction. It is truly mind-blowing that Sergeant Williams told Mr. Argent it was a crime to express self-harming thoughts, and at every point during the encounter, the officers treated Mr. Argent like a criminal rather than a citizen who they claim to believe was experiencing a mental health crisis. Had Mr. Argent actually been struggling with ideation or any other sort of mental health issues, these officers' actions would have made the situation far worse, and rather than exhibiting any sort of care for Mr. Argent's well-being, the officers approached the encounter in the same authoritarian manner they would have employed when investigating a criminal suspect, likely violating Mr. Argent's Fourth Amendment rights in the process. This encounter demonstrates how woefully inadequate mental health training can be in police departments, and how inappropriate traditional law enforcement methods are for certain community caretaking functions officers are required to complete. Mr. Argent gets an A for asserting his right to walk away from a consensual encounter and his right to refuse to answer questions, reasonably complying with officer commands, and pursuing appropriate legal action after the encounter. While Mr. Argent did have some choice words for the officers, he was certainly within his First Amendment rights to express himself and his opinion of their behavior during the interaction, and he still made sure to comply with the officers' orders while challenging their validity. I commend Mr. Argent for his ability to protest the officers' actions and exercise his rights while still remaining within the requirements of the law, and I truly hope that he is able to find an attorney and pursue a civil rights lawsuit. Let us know if there is an interaction or legal topic that you would like us to discuss in the comments below. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to check out my second channel for even more police interaction content.